Hey, Witch Mob! Welcome to the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast. If your ideal vacation includes lounging in hammocks and reading books, Secret Garden could be the perfect spot for you. From observing iguanas to watching hummingbirds, picking fresh tropical fruit from the garden, and walking to the beach, you can do as little or as much as you like. Secret Garden is an eco-house where you can get away from it all and truly relax. Make your booking on Instagram or Facebook at Secret Garden Mompiche. The links are in the show notes. Use the code WITCHPOD for a 20% discount on a 6-day stay. Hey everyone, thanks for being here. It's really appreciated. And don't forget to tell your friends to follow on Spotify. This week, we're traveling to Israel. I really had some doubts about telling this story. Actually, my procrastination game really upped itself when I was thinking about this story because I kind of thought I didn't want to tell it. Firstly, it was incredibly traumatic. In fact, it was so traumatic I didn't tell anyone for over a decade because I didn't know how to put what I had experienced into words. Secondly, it's about terrorism. There is no place in the world for terrorism, and certain groups and individuals continue to blast holes in humanity with zero regard for human life. Thirdly, I'm quite hesitant to appear in support of Israel because the genocide they are currently committing against the Palestinians goes against everything I believe in. Terrorism is Israel's excuse to murder or maim over 50,000 children. It's unforgivable. After some discussion with friends, I agreed to read the story because it's part of the book and it happened, not because I support Israel's current position or its role in perpetrating terrorism. This story takes place in Israel and it's called The Hour-Long Second. So this story took place in the mid-90s and I had met my friends from Israel in India several years previously when I was traveling around India. And so when they invited me to come to Israel and I was living in Istanbul, I went to visit a fabulous person named Daphna. She met me at the airport in Tel Aviv when I first arrived. And we had a lot of fun while we were having fun until the fun stopped. So let's tell this story. Let's go this way, suggested Daphna, deftly weaving her way in and out of the noisy crowd. Okay, I agreed and followed without hesitation. We burst out of the melee and headed toward the beach for a leisurely stroll along the seafront, leaving the chaotic Carmel market far behind us. The cool breeze coming off the crystal-clear water soothed my aching head, which was still pounding from the previous night's enthusiastic pub crawl. The Mediterranean Sea stretched toward the horizon, shimmering in the bright sunlight. Eventually, we wandered into the dusty, winding streets of Old Jaffa, just a stone's throw from Tel Aviv. Ambling along the shoreline, we chatted and laughed and watched children lick frantically at melting ice cream cones, while thick trickles of gooey pistachio dessert dripped from their elbows. This is one of my favourite cafes, enthused Daphne, heading into an ornately paved terrace on the shorefront. We sat on hand-woven killams, plump cushions scattered around the perimeter, right on the edge of the 4,000-year-old harbour city. Nearby, children giggled and thrashed around in the churning waves of the warm sea. "This is more like it," I said, after the waiter took our orders for mint tea. The pulsating crowd in the market had been stifling, but the serenity of old Jaffa was unbeatable. "Look at how lucky we are," chuckled Daphne. "Relaxing on the beach on a warm February afternoon, while the rest of Europe freezes its little buns off." I had to admit, there were a lot of reasons to visit Israel in February. This was one of them. I was in Tel Aviv almost 2 weeks, staying in the charming Hatikva quarter with my old friend. We walked the promenade, saw the view from Shalom Tower, and spent a small fortune on jewellery in Nahalat Binyamin Street, dancing until dawn at funky nightclubs, chatting and people-watching in alfresco cafes and lively restaurants, meeting new friends from near and far. The trip had not been dull. We went to parties, found Valentine's on February the 14th, and shopped until we dropped in street bazaars. Despite falling in love with Tel Aviv, I wanted to see more of Israel. Jerusalem beckoned, but then so did Haifa and Eilat and Masada, the Negev Desert, the Dead Sea, and Galilee. Choosing a destination was a tough decision. There were too many good choices. Finally, I booked a bus ticket and set out to see the biblical city of Jerusalem. Tel Aviv was my base, while I travelled around Israel in short spurts. I packed a few items of light clothing and a camera for a few days in Jerusalem. Daphne dropped me off at the bus station and kissed my cheeks. She had organised for me to stay with Helen, one of her high school friends that I had met at one of the many parties. "See you in a week or so," she said as she drove away, waving and smiling. The bus station crawled with people. Bored backpackers stood around waiting to board buses. Women with headscarves dragged bulging bags into compartments under buses, and men wearing kippahs helped them. Children ran around in circles, screaming at the top of their lungs. Mothers yelled at children. Husbands yelled at wives. Teenage girls cried, clinging to boyfriends who were unable to console them. Soldiers shouldering machine guns stood in small groups and chatted. It was chaos. I was grateful I'd left my heaviest backpack at Daphne's. Slinging my light day pack over my shoulder, I took my seat on the Egged bus to Jerusalem. The Judean lowlands swept past the windows. I leaned my head against the pane of glass, half dozing and half alert. My guidebook informed me we were passing the Modi'in region. The bus was crowded. People stood in the aisles. A child screamed. Someone sneezed. A man fidgeted with his kippah. A woman chewed a dried fig. A baby cried. Someone farted. Children giggled. I buried my nose in the guidebook, reading about Jerusalem and the old city district with its walls and gates and colourful markets. There was no shortage of interesting places to visit: the Dome of the Rock, Temple Mount, and the Western Wall. I could spend a month in Jerusalem and still not see it all. I quit reading and looked out the window as we ascended into the Judean mountains at Shar HaGai, the gate of the valley. This was my first glimpse of the magnificence of the Palestinian landscape: forested mountains, ancient terraced hillsides, dramatic ravines, and glorious vistas. A short while later, we rolled into Jerusalem's central bus station at the north entrance to the city at the beginning of Jaffa Road. Yasser Arafat had just been elected as the president of the Palestinian National Authority. His new Fatah majority, Harakat al-Tahrar al-Filistini government, had been formed during a moment of optimism in the Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations, even though it held limited powers within the context of Israeli occupation. Despite this, many Palestinians still believed Arafat's government would be able to take the first steps to form an independent Palestinian state. The Islamist Hamas, Fatah's main rival, refused to participate. Instead, Hamas did their utmost to hinder the correct functioning of the parliament, effectively augmenting the considerable Israeli obstruction Arafat was up against in his bid to free Palestine. Jerusalem is one of the most hotly disputed cities in the world. At the center of an age-old tug-of-war between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, Jerusalem either built a solid foundation for one's religious beliefs or erased them forever. The ancient city wasn't trapped in a time warp. It was a bustling, smelly, noisy modern metropolis. People from all over the world came to live in the city, but anyone who had taken more than a passing glance at a newspaper any time during the last century knew few Jerusalemites of any religious persuasion were bound by the tenet to love one's neighbour as oneself. With all this in my head, I took a deep breath and stepped out into the street. As I walked toward the pedestrian mall on Ben Yehuda Street, the busy Mahane Yehuda market buzzed away on my right. I plunged into the thunderous pandemonium with reckless abandon to buy bread, cheese, fresh fruit, and avocados for my generous hostess. As I stepped back into the sunlight on Jaffa Road, a bomb disposal van sped past, lights flashing and sirens wailing, going towards Central Bus Station. Everything stopped at once, creating a massive traffic jam and stranding people waiting at bus stops. Police and soldiers gathered en masse to prevent anyone travelling towards the bus station. Eventually, the chaos cleared and traffic started moving. I expressed my gratitude to the gods of circumstance I had decided to walk the short distance to the mall. As I strolled down Jaffa Road, another police bomb disposal van raced past, heading in the opposite direction. The whole world stopped once again. Word on the street said it was another false alarm. I noticed the old buildings lining the road. One of them had beautiful neoclassical lines and was adorned with the winged lion of Venice. This building stood out amongst the others. I admired the architecture as I passed and continued on to the mall. I phoned Helen when I got there, and she came to meet me. It was a short walk to her apartment. We spent Saturday evening chatting and hanging out at home, watching a movie. I woke up with the sun. In an effort to keep fit during my travels, I took to walking a few brisk kilometres around town every day. I threw a map and a water bottle into my bag with the key Helen had given me and set out. I stood at the corner of King George and Jaffa Road and looked at my map. I decided to walk straight up Jaffa Road. It surprised me how busy the streets were at that hour. The city was crowded with people going to work on Sunday. Vehicles competed for space on the roads. Crowded city buses and share taxis chugged slowly through the early Sunday morning traffic. Getting into a rhythm of pounding feet and greeting the people I passed, I strode up the long main street towards the bus station. At the gate, I went inside to buy more water. The next moment, I was on my knees on the pavement. The noise was deafening. I spun around and saw the bus up in the air, twisted like a discarded soft drink can. I saw pieces of people flying in all directions, parts of their bodies scattered everywhere. A head fell to the ground in front of me. The force of the blast blew the windows out of nearby buildings. Shards of glass rained down. Some of the buses were on fire. One charred body hung from a jagged metal spike that had been the bus's roof only seconds before. Mutilated people sat in their seats, blackened by the flames. At least one of them had been decapitated. I couldn't hear anything. I could see people screaming and crying. I could see men shouting frantically, but I couldn't hear them. It was like a silent horror movie. Time hung in the air. Everything slowed down. It became a surreal scene from a nightmare that wouldn't go away. The millisecond it took for a suicide bomber with a 10-kilo bomb to destroy the bus and kill 26 people felt like an hour. At 6:48 a.m., on the 25th of February 1996, Bus 18 and Central Bus Station had been reduced to a charred skeleton of twisted metal and melted vinyl. The carnage all around resembled a gruesome battlefield. It wasn't long before Hamas claimed responsibility. I looked down and saw blood on my arms. Panicked, I didn't know if it was mine. The bomb had been packed with nails, ball bearings, and bullets. Some people had parts of their bodies missing and writhed in pain on the pavement. Emergency workers hurriedly bandaged what live victims they could and sent them to hospitals in packed ambulances. Charred pieces of human flesh were strewn all over. I tried to stand and couldn't. A man was shouting at me. I couldn't hear him. The bus station was filled with shredded human flesh, charred body parts, and rivers of blood. A severed hand lay nearby, 2 of its fingers missing. A woman lay on the ground in front of me. Her dress had been ripped from her body, her hair burned off. Nails and flying metal lacerated her arms and legs and ripped open her stomach. A piece of shrapnel severed an artery on her neck. Bright red blood pumped out onto the sidewalk. Someone applied a pressure bandage and threw her into an ambulance. Still, I couldn't move. The man continued shouting. Someone grabbed me by the arm and helped me off the ground. "Are you okay?" he asked me. "Are you okay?" Speechless, I could only stare. He was covered in blood. It dripped from his clothes. Each drip hit the ground with a splash. He had been helping victims. I felt helpless and useless and stupid all at the same time. Then I heard screaming. The streets were filled with sirens and shouting. People cried with grief and roared with rage. Victims screamed in agony and shock. I staggered through the carnage, unable to believe I had been witness to such horror. It's also absolutely shocking that I was still alive and unharmed in that situation. 45 minutes later, a second bus exploded southwest of Jerusalem at Ashkelon Junction, killing 1 soldier and injuring 35 civilians. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. I could leave any time. I didn't have to live like this. My ticket out was a sure thing. Someone in a uniform led me away from the bomb site towards the chaotic street. I don't remember how I got back to Helen's flat. She opened the door. I had lost the bag with her key in it. Helen had heard about the blast and knew I'd gone for a walk. She didn't say anything as I stepped into the apartment, covered in blood and dirt, white with shock and trembling. She put her arms around me, and I broke down. Apart from bruised knees, I hadn't been physically hurt. The blood on my arms was someone else's. "I'm worried about you," said Daphne when she called later that day. "Come back to Tel Aviv." I spent the next week in a daze. I had decided to stay. There was no point in running away. The nightmare of what I had seen would stay with me forever, no matter where I went. Resolute, I became a tourist in Jerusalem, walking for miles each day to explore the old city and Temple Mount, the bazaars and Dome of the Rock. I avoided the end of Jaffa Road. I wasn't ready to face that. I didn't travel on buses or go to crowded markets. At times, I was afraid to go to the supermarket, afraid of being in crowded places. I resumed my morning walks on Wednesday. Despite the underlying current of fear, Jerusalem is lovely first thing in the morning. I marched around the streets, going in a different direction each day for an hour or so. Soon I came to know the city quite well. By the time Sunday rolled around again, it was as if the whole thing had been a terrible nightmare. Just before 6:30, on the morning of 3 March 1996, feeling a bit safer than I had on previous days, I set out to walk up Jaffa Road once more. As I stood on the corner of King George, the number 18 bus rolled along the street. As it approached the lovely building with the winged lion, an ear-splitting explosion ripped the bus apart. For an entire block, Jaffa Road looked like a war zone. Storefronts were blown out. Glass and shrapnel covered the streets. At the center of the scene was the burned and twisted frame of the city bus. It was surrounded by bodies, blown apart in the wreckage. One thing I remembered later, after I wrote this story, was green apples. There were 6 green apples rolling down the street towards me, all in a row, one after the other, just rolling down the street. And I was staring at the apples, and a man was running across the street in an army uniform, and his boot just crushed one of the apples. And I still remember that today. The green apples and the boot and the crushing, and how quickly everything ended, how quickly life ended. A young man was lying amidst the debris, his head thrown back as if he was sleeping. The lower half of his body lay at an angle next to him. The hour-long second return. Again, Hamas proudly put their name on it. Time stood still as emergency workers covered bodies with blankets. A steady rain began to fall. The bomber was Islam Abu Abed, a 24-year-old Palestinian from Hebron. He killed 19 people. The bomb, packed with bits of metal, did so much damage, it took several days for police to identify the bodies of the victims. Palestinian rage at Israeli occupation was understandable. Senseless mass murder wasn't. Mohammed Deif, commander of Hamas's military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades were wreaking havoc, undoing all of Arafat's good intentions. It was incomprehensible that human beings had the capacity to do this to each other. Bombing innocent people wasn't a solution. The following day, on 4th March 1996, a suicide bomber blasted the Dizengoff Center in Tel Aviv on Deif's orders, killing 13. The police were on high alert. Security was tight. Armed police and soldiers patrolled the streets on foot. Police and army jeeps made regular patrols. Security guards stood outside cafes and hotels. To travel by car, bus, or even on foot had become a gruesome, murderous lottery. Daphne drove to Jerusalem to pick me up. I refused to take a bus back to Tel Aviv. I flew out a few days later on the first available flight, vowing never to set foot in Israel again. Airport security was tight. My bags were searched by stern security guards before I was allowed to check in. They dismantled my camera and asked me to take a photograph when I put it back together. A woman rummaged through my dirty underwear, while a man searched through the pockets of my emptied backpack. Things have settled down. It's safe now. It took Daphne almost 18 months to convince me to return. At the end of July 1997, I flew back to Tel Aviv for 1 week. Daphne took a few days off work, and we went to Jerusalem to see some of her old friends and do some shopping. I was nervous travelling around the volatile city. Once again, Helen opened her door to us and proved herself a wonderful hostess. Sticking close to home, we made the most of her hospitality, lending a hand in the kitchen for every meal. We were laughing at someone's joke while buying bagels on Jaffa Road when the bombs went off. We heard the explosions from inside the bakery and hit the floor, huddling close. The Mahane Yehuda produce market had been attacked by 2 suicide bombers who killed 16 people and wounded 178. It was beyond me how any young person anywhere in the world could consciously decide to kill themselves in such a deplorable way. The open-air market had been crowded with morning shoppers just hours before the start of the Jewish Sabbath. Again, Mohammed Deif's Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades claimed responsibility for the attack, undermining Arafat's efforts to bring peace to Palestine. People who lived or worked or shopped or dined or just walked around in Jerusalem were haunted by the constant debilitating fear of sudden horrific violence. It was a risky matter of not being in the wrong place at the wrong time. For me, It was a matter of not being there at all. I simultaneously loved and loathed Jerusalem. It was an enchantingly beautiful city, but its veins pulsed with seething hatred. Its gorgeous mosques, churches, synagogues, and temples were the epitome of serenity. Its streets filled with devastating violence. As for my own religious beliefs, whatever thin shreds existed before I arrived were shattered into a million shards before I left. I don't believe there's a sane deity in any religion that would allow this kind of terror to take place. Since my third face-to-face encounter with mindless terrorism, I've never been back to Israel. Just telling this story gives me PTSD, just remembering it, the horrific things that I saw. I still feel speechless about it. Those are sights I'll never be able to forget. Pieces of people, the smell, the sound. I'll never forget those things. I will always be traumatized by this story, and I didn't realize that until just now while I was reading it. And even though it took place nearly 30 years ago, this is still happening in the world today. We haven't changed. We've done nothing. We haven't changed at all. Exactly the same things are happening over and over and over again. History repeating and repeating and repeating until what? Until none of us exist anymore, until humanity's wiped off the planet. I mean, what's the end goal here? I'll never be able to forget this. I think we shouldn't forget it, just to honour the people that have been lost and wounded by acts of terrorism. What happened on Jaffa Road is a sight I'll never forget. I'll also never be able to erase the images of dismembered Palestinian children from my mind. The only people who win at war are the ones manufacturing and selling the weapons. Everyone else is a loser. That means us. We each lose a piece of our soul every time a child is murdered in war. But there's no profit in peace. And solely for this heinous reason, we will never see peace in our lifetimes. It hurts my heart to know this is true, and it also is traumatizing. I've had a lot of trauma in my life, from child abuse, domestic violence, rape. I've been shot at. I've had guns pointed at me. I've had all kinds of horrible things happen to me. Even right now, where I'm at now, people are doing things to cause trauma. And all of these things cause trauma. This story caused me so much trauma, I couldn't talk about it for over a decade. And even now, when the bus exhaust goes off, I'm looking for the shooter. I know I'm not the only person in this position. I don't know if these stories are worth telling in a world where everybody feels traumatized by everything these days. But this is my story to tell, and I've told it. Next week, we're going to lighten the mood a little, and we're going to head to the set of a James Bond movie based in India. I'll see you next week. Don't forget to follow on Spotify.
Hey there, love bugs! Welcome to the jungle! I'm Nancy Miarelli, your guide to the ecological and entomological, i.e. bug, wonders of Ecuador. With my master's in entomology and a passion for ecology and conservation, I'm here to take you on an unforgettable adventure through the mega diverse forests and more lush than you may have expected mountainsides of Ecuador. This year, I'm excited to offer 2 unique science-focused tours. Join me for a nature journaling course where we'll sit in the grass, sketch, observe, and reflect on all the creatures and plants that we discovered. Or dive deep into evolutionary theory on my evolution tour, where you'll see what you learned in a book that one time growing on the side of a tree. Ready to embark on a journey of discovery? Visit www.scibugs.info, that is Scibugs, SCIBUGS, to learn more or find me, Scibugs, everywhere on the internet. Let's explore Ecuador and all it has to offer together.
Do you have any crazy travel stories? What's the most insane thing that happened to you while you were on the road? If you'd like to share, send an MP3 recording of your story or write it into an email and send it to thewitchmob@gmail.com, and it could feature in a future episode. The Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast is created, written, read, produced, edited, mixed and published by BooksByRoni. If you'd like to grab a copy of Few Are Ooh, Travel Tales I Never Told Mom, find the paperback on Amazon or email thewitchpod@gmail.com to get an ebook. Also, let us know via email or on Blue Sky at The Witch Pod if you're reading in a book club or a group of friends so we can give you a shout out. Don't forget to tell us where you are in the world. You can visit The Witch Pod on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music and Castbox, and also Substack and Patreon. See you next week.
Bye!